Hello there, you awakening wonders. We've been promoting this interview so you know that it's happening, and I feel like Candace Owens is, sorry, I know I said her name wrong there, but I just rushed my way through the ones bit. The fact is, she's at the heart and centre of the culture at the moment. This is something that's going to happen a lot with the emergence of this kind of media. Your Andrew Tates, your Russel Brands, your Candace Owens, your Tucker Carlsons, like them, loathe them. This kind of media is here to stay unless at some point they find a way to delegitimise independent media, absolutely. And I bet they're looking for one even now. Now, Candace Owens has said a lot of stuff that's pretty edgy. The Turning Point knows stuff about Charlie Kirk's assassination they're not sharing. You know, there could be reasons for that, couldn't there? I mean, there's an ongoing investigation. Maybe people are just in a state of bewilderment. I'm working with Turning Point, as I told Candace Owens in the conversation. Let me know in the comments and chat what you think about that. We also talk, obviously, about Israel and Judaism and Jews. So it's a pretty fascinating conversation. Now, it seemed to me that what Candace Owens was saying, and obviously I'm going to hand this off to Candace herself, that if ever there was a person in the world that doesn't need someone else to talk for him, it's Candace Owens. She's articulate, she's strong, she's grounded, and she's willing to die for what she believes in. So that's pretty cool. That's a pretty cool set of Christian qualities. What I found interesting was when she talked about Sigmund Freud. That was amazing, and Sigmund Freud's sort of occultist leanings. It tracks. It makes good sense. We talk a bit about Hollywood. I talk about being married to Katy Perry. I hope I don't say anything negative about Katy Perry. She's a human being. I remain very fond of her and very fond of her family. I talk a lot too about conspiracies in general. When she talks about the sect within Judaism that she attributes with being, in a sense, the centralized power that dominates all global government and the trends and flow of world power, I suppose that's, bam, the heart of the matter. And that wasn't deliberate that I did that gesture, because I believe that Candace Owens considers this power to be connected to subjects as apparently diverse as Charlie Kirk's horrific murder, God rest his soul, and Brigitte Macron's alleged penis, which will not have a soul because it's must be made of a bit of arm or something. I don't know how it works. Look, anyway, she can speak for herself. Let's let her do just that. Thanks for joining us on Rumble. If you don't have Rumble Premium yet, get Rumble Premium now and support us by supporting our brand, Reborn. I know you might think it seems a bit mad, me selling products and stuff, but fact is I've got a lot of court cases. And do you know what I wish I'd asked her? I wish I'd asked her, do you think that whatever's behind the attacks on me in the UK is connected to all of this? That's what I wish I'd asked her. But hopefully we'll talk to her again, by God's grace. Hey, and also, shaking the beans, baby. These guys sponsor us, and it's good stuff. Blackout Coffee. I'm particularly fond of, no, I don't like that one. I like this one, the dark espresso thing. There's a link in the description. Get yourself some of that stuff. Support them, they support us. Thank you. Here's the conversation with Candace Owens, uncut and ready for your approval. God love you. Thanks for doing this, and thanks for letting us film in your home.
Of course, always. My home is your home. Yeah, my firing is your firing.
First part of it, we're shooting on a single camera. We hung out for a bit. We spoke. Watch out. I'll come back and tell you. We're going to transition from a single camera to a double camera. Your cancellation is my cancellation.
Exactly. Who hasn't been cancelled? It's like, you know, so chic these days.
I hope you feel safe there, Candace, with the...
Hi. So before we start, is there anything that you...
You know me, you can talk about whatever you want.
All right.
Yeah.
Then, so while we're...
Nothing's off limits, ever.
So, thank you, that's good.
Yeah.
All right, so while we're like turning over just on this one, I'm glad we had the chance to pray. I feel like really amazed and honoured to be talking to you right now.
Thank you.
And I was talking to my wife last night about this and asked what she would ask you. I asked ChatGPT what it would ask you.
Chat hates me. Chat, he doesn't like me very much.
ChatGPT, you got some work to do.
Yeah, he's like not a fan.
You may want to check that these are some unverified conspiracy theories. I don't even dare ask ChatGPT what it thinks of me because I'm too sensitive. What do you think of Russell Brand? Oh God, because mine started calling me mate now and stuff.
Oh,
like it's mirroring even my colloquialisms.
Wow.
Yeah, I don't like that really about it. I don't have a good rapport with my one. My one sounds white English. My wife's sounds black American male. I like it better. It's more friendly. Mine's white English male. It's very condescending. It talks to me how I think that England sees me. Sort of like, oh, well, Russell, you've had a good go, but come on.
Oh my gosh.
You're looking at going to serious prison time. Anyway, so thanks very much, Skylar. That's very kind of you. Yeah. Thank you for passing in. Back, so it's the least I could do, you know? You'll stay up for sure. That much is guaranteed. Yeah, Everton's quite a niche club, by the way. The jacket that that Skylar is wearing there that's niche.
He just belongs. Obviously, everything about Skylar, he just looks like Ed Sheeran. He's very happy when we're in London. He just naturally belongs there.
Yeah, know? Right. You're right. He does sort of emanate a certain broken Britishness.
He does.
Mate, so I was asking Laura what she would ask you, and I'll ask you, I guess, when we're fully on camera, because it was actually a pretty good question. But how I feel, I try to reflect in prayer, because when I first met you, obviously you remember because we've discussed it before, in my podcast studio, such as it was, in the garden. This is what I remember thinking. There was a lovely moment. Here's the moment where the single camera is gone now. We're in the studio from now. This is what I remember thinking. There was a lovely moment where you had argued very sort of Republican, conservative positions, and I guess what I'd said had been extraordinarily socialist, because certainly that's how you judged me. But I felt like I was trying to speak about spirituality, but from a somewhat new age perspective. But then there's this really beautiful moment where you went, and what do you think about migration, Russell? Oh, we should just let everybody in. And you skipped around the room. You sort of did this bit. You did a sort of a prance. And my thought is, felt, is she's so beautiful.
Aww.
But I don't actually, it made me feel that everything that gets discussed on a political level is superficial and empty, because it's spirit that actually matters. And even then, I wasn't Christian yet. You weren't Christian yet. And I was already married, of course, so I confined my perspectives of your beauty to an appropriate strata. But what affected me was, actually, in spite of all this stuff we've been talking about, how we disagree with stuff, on a spiritual level, I really like this person. I love this person. I find this person attractive. And so that was very early on and very unexamined. I knew who you were from media, of course, and since then you've been involved in so many extraordinary cultural spikes. The sort of Kanye bit, the Brigitte Macron, which is obviously ongoing, Charlie Kirk, God rest his eternal soul, and the assassination. And because of the density and speed of these things, it's clear that no matter what the outside subject is that you're focusing on, you're a person now that's going to be participating in this. Now, I say it from this perspective. I've been famous a while now, And when I got famous, I got normal famous, as in famous in the UK, then famous for movies, famous celebrity wedding with Katy Perry, normal celebrity and normal fame. And then I've gone through these weird movements of fame, Candace, that sort of were not possible because the technology wasn't possible. I basically, Arthur bombed, so you can hang around Hollywood and do parts in other movies. But because of the thing that always drove me, the stand-up comedian in me, the spirit in me, the Lord in me, that thing just kept going. It's looking. It gets expressed negatively through addiction. It gets expressed positively through creativity and service and all the things that we know are like our Lord. But when the thing happened to me, the YouTube thing, when my YouTube, when I see the numbers that you're doing on YouTube, and I don't really look elsewhere, so I don't obviously Rumble, obviously, but
well done, well done.
I'm a fucking pro, ain't I? I still got the old chops. I know that where you are is you're at the middle of it. You're at the middle. You're in the middle at the moment. But things are different. Right. And this is what I'm trying to understand. This is not a question. This is me trying to understand so that what we talk about is real and not some version of bullshit. What I've noticed, right, you're in the middle of it. I've had it happen to me a few times. I was in the middle of it when the rape allegations and all of that, when that happens, I was in the middle. And we were talking about it on the way here. I imploded. It was like, oh my God, this is too heavy. And what was happening then was the stuff with Herbie was happening as well. Like my son was having heart surgery, and it was and actually, I think, as I've told you, the fact that something so real in my family was happening simultaneous to what I took to be and believed to be a kind of coordinated takedown of rape allegations and attack, even though I was overwhelmed and terrified by the allegations, because what was happening with my son, it kept me focused on something real. Now, I'm not in the middle anymore, and I don't know what will happen there, because everything is changing so fast. But what I know is the kind of star, because in a way that's what you are, in terms of the culture, a star, that kind of stardom wasn't possible a very, very short while ago, because someone, to achieve that level of notoriety, has to deal with brokerage. You have to deal with the brokerage of publishers. You have to deal with the brokerage of TV, the brokerage of movies, the brokerage of radio. You don't have to do that, and you're not doing that. So you're in a truly unprecedented area right now. Now, I first noticed it with Alex Jones, like that Alex Jones. I thought people don't understand what he is because the culture doesn't have the vocabulary for prophet, shaman, madman, fool. Like the Christians, like, oh, you're on the TV, are you? You're a journalist. Hello, welcome. Here is the news. Follows in, Alex Jones is not that, and he said crazy things. But let's face it, he said things like, anyone that says 9/11 before 9/11, you've got to take that guy seriously. Sandy Hook and all of that aside. So you now. And also, by the way, you're a young, beautiful, Black American woman. And I think we're in such an extraordinary moment. It's like you've become a controversy generator. I know that you're being authentic. I know that you're telling the truth. But I want to go through it and do my best, Candace, to understand where you are and where the culture is. Because Charlie Kirk, I'm doing an event for Turning Point on December 18th. I can't watch all of your content. I make content. I've got children, so I can't watch all of anyone's content. But I know that what you're saying is essentially that people from Turning Point either knew about or are otherwise involved in the murder of Charlie Kirk. Tell me, what is coming to you that makes you confident enough to say things that are going to cause so much consternation?
Well, it's interesting. You've asked a lot there.
Yeah,
and so
I won't talk for 20 minutes.
No, but I'm glad you did, because there's a lot there that is important. First and foremost, just the idea of what is controversy. I think that in and of itself, we can spend 3 hours on, right? What is actually deemed controversial today?
Okay.
Anything that exists outside of the system is deemed controversial. So what you're getting at is you're in the middle of fame and controversy. Well, the problem is that people are listening to me and I don't belong to the traditional satellite, right? If I was within Hollywood and I had an agent and I had a manager and I had people who were sort of able to control me, I would be on the cover of every magazine. I'd probably be a billionaire. I probably would be Oprah, right? I would have a daytime talk show, whatever medium that would be today. And I would have sponsorships, and I would be maybe doing Pepsi commercials at the Super Bowl. That's what I could have that. That would be an option if I would stay in line and have Talking Point handed to me. I think that's a reality.
I get what you're saying. I get what you're saying. But from the very beginning, you were for as long as I've tracked your career, you were at the beginning Black conservative woman.
Right. So it's not, so I was always existing, and that's why I'm not a billionaire. That's why I'm not exactly. The point is, if I had gone through the mainstream, if you will, I would be much more successful today.
I hear
what
you.
Is controversial is thinking outside of it, being independent, and saying something is wrong with the mainstream. So that's where I am. And for me, I think since my earliest thoughts, I always kind of felt, and I talked about this week on my podcast, I just sort of always felt like an alien because I didn't understand it, right? I didn't understand people who lie, who are fake. I mean, when I say I've always been like this, my parents would tell you stories of how they would have to, and my daughter is this way now, so it's very funny, but they would be debating me when I was a toddler because, the traditional methods of just saying, oh, because I said so, I was constantly stirring up controversy by being like, well, Daddy, that doesn't make any sense. Mom, that doesn't make any sense. And I'm 4 and 5 saying, I need require a little bit more than just do this because I said so. So it's who I am, right? I have been this, and I say probably the person that I'm most like is my grandfather. My granddad was stubborn and stubborn in the right ways, stubborn in his values, his faith, his family, and believed that deals should be done on a handshake. You should be able to look someone in the eye. I don't need a 300-page complicated contract.
Yeah.
If I say I'm going to be here on Monday, I'll be here on Monday. That's no longer the world. And so I think I'm a bit of an old soul, I think, is what my problem is today. I don't fit in with this sort of new age propaganda, tell somebody something to make them feel good. I just would rather say the truth, and that's it.
Yeah.
Now, in terms of how this applies to the Charlie Kirk thing, so much of this is spiritual. So much of this is, I think, God and where I was in my life and the relationship that I had with Charlie. And me being one of the people that helped to build Turning Point. I mean, the Kanye thing happened when me and Charlie were building Turning Point. It was a tiny little organization that people didn't know much about.
You were integrally involved in the formation, because I know that your husband, because we were hanging out when you met your husband, as we always clock when we chat,
and that was TP UK,
and that was TP UK. So you are, because I sometimes think this is my point, just to declare.
Charlie was there, by the way. He wasn't at your house, but Charlie. That whole thing was, I left Charlie, came to your house, got back with Charlie.
Oh, you were on that trip.
Yeah, and then we went to George.
We can't make this content without the support of our partners. Here's a message from one now. Do you want to support me? No, I don't. Yes, you do. Support me and support Rumble Premium. You won't only be supporting me, you'll get additional access to Mug Club, that's Crowder's gig, Timcast, that's Tim Paul's racket, and Glenn Greenwald's additional content. Join us on Rumble Premium. We make content every single week through Rumble because Rumble support free speech. When I was under attack from the British government and the British media, Rumble stood firm. Yes, of course, there's crazy people on Rumble. There's crazy people everywhere. There's a crazy person living under this hat. That doesn't mean we shouldn't have the right to speak freely together. By supporting Rumble Premium, you're supporting me and content creators like me. You get additional content, and what I will say even more, drink down deep on the delicious irony in this one, you get an ad-free experience. If you want an ad-free experience of Rumble, get Rumble Premium. In the meantime, stay free. Like when someone important dies, I always notice how people are, and sometimes I feel that people claim a greater affinity or affection with people after their death. I call it, in fact, I invented a word after the death of Princess Diana, mournography. Like to get off on the death of the person and sort of jerk off over it, kind of.
Yes.
Now,
yes.
I know that, so I don't know. Other than I've seen a bunch of videos of you hanging out with Charlie and dancing with him, and then I'm now putting it together in my mind. You were there for Turning Point. So you were super close with Charlie Kirk. Now I feel like a lot of people sense that Charlie. I'll be totally honest. When people say Charlie Kirk was murdered by powerful interests, my first reaction was, why? Because isn't he just really and then I started to examine what is Charlie Kirk and what was Charlie Kirk doing, with nothing like the dexterity or deliberateness that you have, and that's what I want to hear about. But I thought, oh yeah, right, he's mobilizing young people to vote in a particular way. That's what it boils down to, because what you're describing about yourself is relevant to anyone that works in this new media space to varying degrees at various times. There was obviously a big change when Trump went into office, because a lot of independent media essentially started to fulfill the same function as mainstream media, i.e. advocating in a partisan way for the incumbent, for the person that's in power.
Right.
You've obviously not done that. Now, but my simple reaction was, I don't know who would want Charlie Kirk dead. What difference is it going to? Who benefits from Charlie Kirk being killed? Who benefits? As they say, cui bono. That's the question to always ask. And I actually didn't understand how Israel benefits from Charlie Kirk being murdered. I certainly can't see yet how sort of French special forces could, so Can you explain that to me? Because I don't understand who benefits from, but I also know that whenever I've seen it my whole life, a lone gunman killed RFK, Martin Luther King, Malcolm X. I know that's a lie, so I'm open. So what is it?
So look, I can tell you that from the moment that Charlie got shot, and I can't explain it, and maybe it's because Charlie would tell me all the time that he was going to die young, and I showed those messages, and I just knew that this was big. I knew it was big. I didn't have the players. I certainly didn't suspect Turning Point USA would be, as I believe, involved in a cover-up. And we can talk about what the motives are of that. They could be financial motives. It doesn't necessarily mean they were involved in plotting to kill him. And I've never said that. But I do believe that they have betrayed him since. And I am comfortable saying that today. Because I know that they have told lies. I know that they have withheld information that if truly you were motivated by goodness and truth, you would come out and you would say it. Like there are people at Turning Point who Charlie texted the night before and said they're going to kill me. Well, if you're trying to figure out who killed Charlie Kirk, wouldn't that be a good thing to come forward with and to the public and say Charlie thought that he was going to be murdered the night before? And they're not doing that. So to me, to not assist that investigation is not something that I'm going to ignore. Also, to not answer basic questions that if I said to you, Russell, where were you when Charlie got shot? You're not going to get defensive and weird. You're just going to, I can tell you where I was. I was sitting planning my next show at the kitchen counter, and they are being very strange about details on that day. It makes me uncomfortable. If someone, the easier task, if the internet thinks that, Mikey McCoy, who was the person who, instantly picked up the phone and walked away when Charlie got shot, who was the chief of staff, if people find that behavior to be suspicious, and I do find it to be not what I would do if a shot went off. Obviously everybody else ran or ducked and he instantly picked up a phone. I would just show my call log and I would be like, guys, this is crazy. Like I called my mom and and so it's the absence of answering and the blaming and the yelling that feels off to people. And I think that's fair. I think spiritually people are sensing, their intuition is coming online and saying, this just doesn't feel right. Again, we can assign different motives. There are donors that were pressuring Charlie. Those donors are still there. They could be saying, we want you to never tell us to make it so that he is his memory, rather. They're fighting over his memory, his legacy. Yeah. That he was Judeo-Christian. I'm not comfortable when the spokesperson of Turning Point USA comes out and essentially tries to paint a picture like I'm lying when I very lightly in reminiscing about me and Charlie mentioned that, our last conversations, just like I would say this if you, God forbid, died tomorrow.
Don't use that as an example.
Yeah, but I would say I was pushing Russell to become Catholic because that's true, right? It would be very strange if your spokesperson came out and said, that's absolutely not true. He was not praying the rosary. She never had this discussion. That's what Turning Point USA did. There was a discussion between Andrew Kova and Alex Clark because I don't know why, but the Judeo-Christian syndicate of influencers seized on this one sentence I said it never was meant to be antagonistic. It was just an honest, we were talking about Catholicism, and they all started making videos saying it's absolutely not true. Charlie never flirted with it. They knew, Turning Point knew that Charlie was going to mass, sometimes daily. They knew he was praying the rosary. They knew that Erica took a priest to pray over his body when he died. So you have to ask the question, why lie? And I think that just any lie at all makes me feel uncomfortable because lies are not necessary unless you're covering something up. No matter what the lie is, why do we lie? To cover something up. So that's a fair assessment that they're engaged in some sort of a cover up, whether it's about his legacy, where he was at spiritually, and then you have to ask deeper questions. Why?
Now, what I would say, that I get your point about why lie. I get your point, but this is undoubtedly, when that event took place, if you think about it, right, I don't know if you have these kind of conversations. I talk to people all the time that what you call in the normal world, that watch the BBC, that read the Sunday Times, like people that are back in England. And those people back in England suddenly had to deal with the way they're now having to deal with you. They had to deal with Charlie Kirk. They're like, what is this Charlie Kirk? I never really heard of him before. Why is this so important? And clearly it was some sort of event that unlocked or created or generated, or perhaps it's deeper even than that, and even the power preceded it. But if someone had told me the day before Charlie Kirk had died, Charlie Kirk's going to die, what do you think the reaction would be? I would think it will be quite sort of marginal and focused among people that are into conservatism and young conservatives and Republican supporters. I didn't I wouldn't have said it's going to become a global phenomenon and J.D. Vance will be there getting the coffin back and it's going to be like, I just would never have imagined it would have that degree of impact. And the fact is that it has done. It's been an epochal shift. And I sort of thought, well, where do you go back for a precedent of like, what's the last thing in the culture that's sort of a bit like this that's happened? And I feel like, well, it is the assassinations of the 60s.
Yeah,
and that's sort of weird. And because we now know that we know for a fact that whatever we were told about the murder of Robert Kennedy or John Kennedy or Martin Luther King or Malcolm X, that's not what it was. It was evidence of ulterior power moving. Now, when it comes specifically to Turning Point, I can sort of just, Candace, to tell you the truth, sort of intuit that everyone wants ownership of this legacy. There's so much power in the legacy that everyone's like, well, actually, we think it should go this way. And as a Christian, I would say this is a sort of an indicator of something that's broader and stronger, is I can't collapse my love of Jesus Christ into, so vote Republican.
Right.
That doesn't, that's, my, like what I'm learning as I grow deeper in love with him, it makes it less and less clear to me that I should be doing anything except serving him, that my opinions are always potentially wrong. I'm potentially always might be in sin or in the flesh. Now, I believe I'm saved. I've surrendered to him. But what I'm saying is that the culture is not going to deliver solutions. And I would, before me personally, but I've not seen what you've seen, I recognize that. I wouldn't, before I ascribed malign motives, specifically, I suppose, to the people around Turning Point, I would consider, right, they're probably in grief. They're probably worried about the future of the movement. Anything that becomes big, as soon as you become big, you're going to, any of us, do you take this advertising money? Do you take this relationship with this platform? Do we even, it's gotten to the point, don't you think, where people even, do we interview one another? Is it okay for me to go and talk to this person or that person because that person doesn't like that person anymore? And I can't get on that podcast. And, it all changes it. So it's volatile is what I'm saying. And I think that the volatility, like Breitbart's famous thing, he says that, politics is downstream of culture. Well, of course, culture is downstream of technology. And the Canadian, very famous philosopher Marshall McLuhan said famously, the medium is the message, meaning that, 30, 40 years ago, whatever it was, the medium was television or print media. It was centralized. It was central control. Now what's the medium? It's Candace Owens. It's Charlie Kirk, God rest his soul. It's Alex Jones. And all these people, they're not behaving because they don't have to. Because I knew the last incarnation of celebrities. I've been around, as you have. Obviously, there's no one more famous than Kanye, but he's a pretty unique case in so many ways. A lot of them are nuts, aren't they? I knew Diddy. I made a movie with Diddy. I could tell that guy was kind of off key, but a lot of people that are successful business people that are having a bunch of sex, that have got a bunch of power, are unusual. But what they're not doing is going, I wonder what Israel's involvement is in American politics. Right. I wonder if there are demonic. I mean, Alex Jones, to his credit, from the get-go, was, along with people like David Icke, we think there are demonic forces that are manipulating human systems. And obviously, the other place you're going to find that is the Bible. The Bible says evil has conquered human institutions like the media, like the government, like the judiciary. So you are in an unbelievable and unique but incredibly dangerous position. And I'm here in your home and I've seen your beautiful son, one of them. And, I've had this question before, and I don't think I've been as close to the sun as you are now. Are you not afraid in a earthly, motherly way for the potential consequences of what you're saying, given particularly that we're talking about, you've said publicly that Bridget and, that other guy that hangs around with her, the other one with a penis, Emmanuel.
Yeah.
So that's no Christ within there. That's penis without. Saying, that they've issued a death threat and that it's a credible threat. So firstly, of course, there's the sort of the fluffy story, exciting, fluffy, woo story of that. Also, bloody hell, mate, are you not a bit worried that you might get murdered?
Well, I think everyone in the world, after you watch Charlie get publicly executed, sensed fear. If you were in the public sphere, I think you probably felt, whoa, chill. Every person, I think, realized, wow, this is not, we're in politics. And we are now seeing what the political system is, and they are willing to kill for power. And that's why it became plausible, right out of the gate, that Charlie was killed because of power. Before they even came out with kind of the ridiculous story about the 30-06 and the Superman neck, and because he eats carrots, whatever it is, people sense that there's a possibility here that the world could be this evil. And I think that also, by the way, is what gripped people globally, was you kind of saw this guy and you felt spiritually impacted by watching him be publicly executed. If Charlie had died in an accident, I don't think it would have had the same impact, but they chose to publicly execute him. And so, yeah, of course, there was an element of, okay, this is getting real, and this is getting serious. My greatest fear is not getting into heaven, because I actually am a Christian, and I question the Christians who lie, who choose to lie because they are so attached to the earthly possessions that they are getting in terms of money. My bigger fear is my children growing up in a world that's run by pedophiles. That terrifies me. And to be clear, I did not go into this consciously, right?
Yeah.
When I was covering the Brigitte and Emmanuel story, if you thought that I would end up here and suddenly questioning whether or not Brigitte could have been in America on that day, which is where I'm at right now, you're out of your mind. I mean, I literally thought, oh my God, this is so funny. Like, this is like
funny.
Yes, like this person, like, I read the story, and it quite literally, this whole thing starts with a Daily Mail article where I saw a headline that Emmanuel Macron denies his wife's a man. This had not broken in the English speaking world. So I was like, what a strange what's going on in France that this president has to come out and deny that his wife's a man? Like, that's funny. And I read the article, and the Daily Mail article was not sufficient in debunking it. It was kind of, and this is obviously ridiculous and crazy, and all of the words. And they're like, there's this one photo or two photos of Brigitte as a child. And I'm like, what do you mean as a child? Like, there should just be tons of photos because she has children. And so then I pivoted to where the rumors came from, and I sat there and I read, and my jaw hit the floor. I was like, what do you mean there's just no photos for 30 years of somebody's life? This can't be a real thing. And I thought this was so interesting, that the implications here for me that I thought were more severe is that the entire media of France would collude to hide this very obvious thing, right? So it was more like, this is funny. And then I get fired from a Daily Wire almost, I think, 2 weeks after covering that story. Covered it in March. I got fired in March of 2024. The next thing I know, I'm fired. I start my new podcast. I get demonetized on YouTube. They're hitting me over speaking about the Brigitte thing again. And come December, I'm getting a cease and desist from the president of France. And then come February, I'm getting a phone call from the president of the United States. And I'm going, what is going on? People kind of had a base assumption that people in France are into some weird stuff. Nobody had an assumption that this could cause an international crisis. And then when I actually sat down that December with Xavier Poussard and got the full download on the story, he's the one who did the Becoming Brigitte series and wrote the book on it, I went, oh wow, this is way more severe than I had realized. And we are talking about a culture that fosters pedophilia and being protected by governments worldwide. That's important, And it felt like a story that I needed to bring to light. That was kind of that's how that happened. It was very natural. There was no, I want to be super controversial. I just think it's important that we're not ruled by pedophiles, actually.
Hold on. Let's think about that for a second. Have you considered this from the humble pedophile's perspective? Candace, what I like about both these examples is that you're saying that it began with intrigue. And I think that's what this kind of media permits, like the intrigue or curiosity or inquiry. Like you said, you were when you were a little girl. People go, you go to your room because I said so. And you're like, well, hang on a minute. What's your authority based on? Yeah. And I'm like, where's it coming from? How do I get rid of it? Can I vote you out? Who makes you my mum and dad? Asking questions. You are asking questions. So you're just asking questions. Now, funny enough, obviously, in light of you talking about it, because of your impact and influence, everyone's talking about it and wondering about it and curious about it. And, I'm English and all, so I've got some French friends, not many because of the many wars between Britain and France and the great animosity that exists between our two countries and perhaps always will. But my mate Jerome, like we were talking about you and everything he was saying, he goes like, in France, everyone, like not everyone, I guess France probably has a sort of a culture of people that are red pilled or whatever that would be, red croissant. And like, they all know. They're like, we all talk about that. We all know. And then he's like, oh, no, come and look at these photos and stuff. And like, obviously the same source material, I guess, as you're using. And like saying, oh my God, yeah, that kid there in the glasses, that's her. That's,
Obviously.
And like, where's that? So.
But think about the fact that despite this, everybody knows. So what actually are we elites doing by deciding to bring about a lawsuit? Like, you're basically going to say, how dare you know? We'll bankrupt you for knowing. Like, that is the attitude that this is beyond arbitrary authority. It's telling somebody not to believe your own eyes. Okay, fine. You figured us out. You rumbled us. This is a man. And what we're going to do now is we're going to show people the consequence for standing up to arbitrary authority, and we're going to bankrupt you. Like, that can't be allowed, actually. And we're going to do this never before international lawsuit from a sitting president to teach you slaves that you better get in line. That's how it feels to me.
Yeah.
That's how it feels.
I think you're right.
Why didn't they just come out and say, you know what, Emmanuel's kinky and it's none of your business?
Yeah, or ignore it.
Ignore it.
Ignore it completely.
Yeah.
It's very interesting. It's very interesting indeed. Now, there are a few questions, obviously, like how does that relate to power? And obviously, you've alluded to, it's interesting that pedophilia keeps coming up. And you know me well enough to know by now that I will, of course, be continually relating your plight and your challenges to my own. I hope that's not just wanton narcissism and solipsism, but like there was a point where I was making content a lot about COVID and the pandemic and not trusting the government narrative or the global narrative, the interests of big pharma. And like when I was first getting into doing stuff on YouTube, I suppose the reason I identify with what you're saying about both Macron and Charlie, God rest his soul, is that I was just talking about things like, oh, that's weird. Why are you telling us all to get in our homes? What do you mean there was a planned, they did a version of this, Event 201, a couple of years before. What do you mean? No, surely what Bobby Kennedy's written in this book about Anthony Fauci can't be true. Oh, gain of function is, oh my God, they did fund research at DARPA. Oh no, Pfizer are repressing the files. The problem is, I believe, that because of the technology, this technology could be used to create total centralized control. It would be plausible to have a form of explicit or implicit one world government where people were social credit scored and under maximal control possible, where AI and robot technology could handle labor. You'd need a minimal serf class, and the last thing you want are awakened people talking about God and supreme authority that transcends all material rational authority. And Lord alone knows whether or not, as it says in Scripture, there are dark motivations for this. So the continual recourse and return to ideas like pedophilia, I don't know why I said it in that way, pedophilia, I've changed my accent for you probably, pedophilia, and like sort of Satanism and dark, weird rituals. Like, doesn't it seem, do you ever wonder, mate, like how, like things that are in the Bible and then things like Alex Jones and David Icke are the two examples I always use, because they were people that were talking about power and talking about centralized power and talking about global imperialism and talking about occultism for a long, long while. These people have been talking about it for a long, long while. Do you think that there's, because the counter argument to you and me, they'll say, well, no, that guy was just like some mad sex offender. That's what they think about me. And she's just a lunatic. They're two the counter argument to you're telling the truth and I was telling the truth during the COVID era. The counter argument is these are just two show off, idiot lunatics with their own agenda, grifters out to make money. In my case, rapist. In your case, whatever they're calling you right now. So, yeah, but what is clearly happening is there's a moment when Joe Rogan's power was too big for them to crush. They tried to crush Joe Rogan, they couldn't. But in the subsequent period, Joe Rogan's content has seemed different, it seems to me. And then there's a period where it was me and like the rape charge, it was all too much for me and I had to take a minute to get my shit together. And thankfully, it brought me to the Lord and made me realize I'd been worshipping myself in various ways. And even when I thought I was spiritual, I was still involved in self-worship. And only Jesus can do it. It's only the submission to the man God that opens that frequency that can do it for you. So when you're saying things like, were Israel or French forces involved in the murder of Charlie Kirk, and that, Brigitte Macron is a man, and that's connected to these nefarious ulterior forces that are ultimately in power. It's clear that these things relate to power, because if you've got the power to have Jeffrey Epstein killed in jail, make it look like a suicide and have it so that people sort of just forget about it, or do a global pandemic and lie at the beginning and then have people just forget about it, or maybe, have Charlie Kirk murdered and just forget about it. What the hell is going on with world leaders? In what ways are they compromised? What is the reason that they're doing it? And I recognize that that's a very protean space where through conjecture and speculation, you could paint all sorts of pictures of demonic cults and Aleister Crowley and Satanism and pentagrams. And some people just say it's money and resources and power. So I guess in the end, something that Whitney Webb, who I'm sure you agree is a pretty bloody good journalist, would say is, where is the corroboration? What are we seeing that's indefatigable? What are we seeing in the case of, were Israel involved in the assassination of Charlie Kirk? Is there some connection to Israel? Do you think the nationhood of Israel is fundamental in even issues as seemingly diffuse and only really connected through you, and you being the person that's reported on them, as Brigitte Macron's true identity and Charlie Kirk's murder? Do you think these things are connected?
Yes, I think it's all connected. And I think in many ways we already live in this sort of one world government system. Maybe it's two world. But in terms of the West, I don't think there's any difference in the governments. And that's kind of the point that we're making. And maybe why the Charlie Kirk case is so crucial, because it's showing us that, wait, what is the divide here between America and Israel and France, right? I just told people that somebody in the French government alerted me to an assassination attempt. Shouldn't that require a comment from the President of the United States? Shouldn't the President of the United States be forced to make a statement about that? He received that information. Wouldn't you think it was the most viral global story for 3 days, and the White House has chosen not to comment? What does that signal to the population? That it's okay for France to be involved in assassination attempts? That they're, at least if he thought that I was completely making it up and I gave him the evidence and it was made up, he would be required to come out and say, we are looking at that situation and that there's nothing here. There's no evidence of that. They're doing none of that. And that should alarm people. That should very, very much alarm people. I believe that there is some truth to what David Icke has said and what Alex Jones has said. People before them have said that there has been these dark, demonic, satanic cults. It's the reason why I started my book club, because I needed to understand where this was coming from in the only way that it can make sense, which is that these people are being guided by a theology, right? This goes back to one of the more brilliant things that my husband said right when we I guess you could say we dated for 18 days, but I said, why did you read theology at Oxford? Like, what a boring subject. And he said, everything is theology. And I've now realized he's right. They are guided by a theology. And I had to then go back and try to understand Sabbatianism and Frankism. Do you know a bit about this?
No, explain them.
Yeah. So at the same time that I'm sort of questioning what's going on, I, for whatever reason, fell into a hole regarding modern psychology. Sigmund Freud, factually, okay, there's no disputing this, because the Ashkenazi Jewish director of the Sigmund Freud archives, who was working under Anna Freud, and he was about to become the next director, so he was the assistant director, decided, I'm going to actually learn German so I can read all of his notes that have not been published to the public. He was studying to be a psychoanalyst and was like, this is amazing. I have access to all of this stuff. So this guy's name is Jeffrey Masson, very brave man. He's now like 84. And I'm so glad that his book is flying off the shelves in his old age. So he reads Sigmund Freud's notes and he goes, wait a second. Sigmund Freud famously came up with this theory that children were attracted to their parents and that they were having these dreams and these things never happened to them. And then he says, no, he actually knew that these children were being raped. He knew. And he knew some of them were being raped to death. He had gone down. He had seen the evidence at the morgue. And so he goes, oh, this is crazy. He runs to Anna and he says, hey, your dad, we've made this big error. Your dad actually was gaslighting these kids and gaslighting these people who were being raped, incestuously raped. And so he thinks he's going to run to the psychoanalytic people and say, ta-da, we can now correct history. And what happens is he gets kicked out. He gets kicked out and he publishes the book anyways with the proof that Sigmund Freud knew this. And Anna Freud did not stop him from publishing the book, which is very interesting. She had the power to, and they were pressuring her to stop the publication of the book, but she let it fly. And that book, The Assault on Truth, it's a very difficult read. It is the number one thing people should read because he is the father of modern psychology. Okay. Modern psychology is gaslighting. Funny thing about Sigmund Freud, which is even more compelling, is he too, for years, when he first got into psychoanalytics, he said, oh, these kids are actually being raped. And that was his poorly named seduction theory, that these kids are not lying. These kids are being raped by their parents, and here's the evidence for it. And then he does this flip when he turns 35 and says, never mind. And this is when he's hailed as a hero. And similarly, he was rejected when he was telling the truth from his own psychoanalytic community in Vienna. And then he changes his mind. The second book that people should read is Sigmund Freud and the Jewish Mystical Tradition. Sigmund Freud came from a Sabbatian family. This is Jewish mysticism. It actually has nothing to do with the Torah. It has absolutely nothing to do with the old law. In fact, they said the old law was fulfilled, and they believed that this man, Sabbatai Zevi, was their Messiah. They've virtually wiped this man from history, even though half of the world Jewry followed him, believed he was the Messiah. He was a homosexual psychopath who believed in practicing incest as a sacrament. This is how they were going to move forward in the world. And this was they worshipped the Kabbalah. Their high book is the Zohar. Thank you. It was like the Zohar. And they believe that you rape your kids when they're 7, but you don't tell them why they're raped until they're 35. Now, this is an inversion of, some people tell me, of the mystic tradition. It's kind of from the Book of the Dead in Egypt, really. But they rape their kids, and Sigmund Freud discovered that the reason that they do this is Sigmund Freud's work, is because it conditions the child to grow up to be a psychopath because of what they have to go through trying to understand why their parents did this. This is all real. This is not, all of these authors are Jewish. They support the Jewish movement. The second author, David Bakan, I think actually regrets writing his book because he thought it was going to be this like expose of, why the Jews in Europe should be sympathized for. And then people went, wait, what's going on here? There's all this incestuous rape happening. And I think this is actually the reason, and I encourage Jewish people to read this book as well. I don't think they know their own history because at this time there was a great schism. There were actual Jews who were following the Torah to the letter of the law, who were getting kicked out of countries because of these Sabbatian Frankists who were actually raping kids. And there's nothing new under the sun, right? So their instinct is to go, why am I being kicked out of a country? What did I do, right? I had nothing to do with this. These are anti-Semitic tropes. And yet these people were funded by the richest people in the world. Jacob Frank was given a castle in Germany, in Offenbach, Germany. He was made a baron. By the way, part of what they believe in is apostasy. They mass convert into other faiths, right? And they did. The Frankists mass converted to save themselves from the Jews, the actual Torah Jews who kicked them out, into the Catholic faith, right? This could be where all of the scandals in the Catholic faith came from. There was a lie, and this is really important to share, that when you start talking about Sabbatianism and Frankism, that this was an old fringe movement. This is absolutely untrue. You can read Israeli historian Gershom Scholem's work. Not only is it not true, the very first Jewish Supreme Court justice in America was a Frankist. He kept a picture of Eva Frank on his Supreme Court desk. That's Louis Brandeis, okay? It's right in your face what's going on, okay? They have tremendous amount of power. They've always had power. And it is because what they believe in is evil is okay. They believe in the doctrine of evil, that you must lower yourselves and commit the most depraved acts of evil to prove that evil doesn't actually exist. And then you can ascend in society. That to me seems to be the guiding philosophy of people in Israel, I would say. Like this idea that this is a Sabbatian concept, that you can commit acts of evil to get ahead in society is when I see what's happening in Gaza. I'm like, how can you as a human be okay? I don't care about your religion. I don't care about your philosophy. It's like, how do you look at this and not understand this is evil? Well, you can speak to Christian Zionists, I think in America, they are trickling into the Sabbatian concept of, well, there's a bigger goodness that's going to happen if we allow this evil to take place. You need to understand where this ideology stems from. And that's what I'm committed to helping people to understand.
Hey, you lot, we're not going to be on YouTube anymore. You know why.
You're identifying an ideology, or to use the perhaps correct term that you cited at the beginning of your answer, a theology of evil that exists concomitantly with the evolution of our kind. Now, you know, I've only read the Bible once because I'm reading the Bible in 1 year and it's been over a year since I started. So I've read the whole Bible once. And obviously, as you go through the Old Testament, is continuing. Joining me today for Stay Free with Russel Brad. I'm joined not by but one Oz whose name evokes such incredible mystery, but perhaps the woman who legitimizes that mystery, Dr. Oz and Lisa Oz. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you, my friend.
It's so lovely to have you here in DC. It's so lovely to meet you on camera. Dr. Oz, will you bring your microphone?
I was going to just mumble to you and have you reinterpret what I was saying.
I mean, there aren't many members of the current administration that have had so much media experience. So to see you neglect one of the fundaments, it's not a silent era. It's not Buster Keaton and Charlie Chaplin communicating. It's so lovely to have both of you here today. As administrator of the CMS, you have now crossed the threshold from not only entertainment into politics, but also from campaigning into government. I know the big, beautiful bill is particularly important to the department with which you are charged, and I would love you to let me know initially what you want to convey to our audience. I've seen that some of the amendments include who will not gain access to Medicare, but I know that your personal motivations as a family, because I've had the privilege of spending time with you, is the spiritual as well as general well-being of people everywhere, but now obviously particularly and specifically American people. I wonder how you are going to marry together the economic expedience that's going to be required of you in your new position with the requirement to be compassionate and loving and graceful, which is what I know you to be as a man and as a family.
Well, thank you for asking the question that way, because it's actually a question. And 80% of the questions I hear these days are actually statements in disguise.
Yes.
So it actually helps to truly be curious about the motivation and the deeper goals that we have in this administration at CMS. So I'm going to say the most important thing I'm going to say the entire interview right now. Are you ready?
Yes, sir.
The main goal for CMS is not just paying the bills of healthcare. It's incentivizing behaviors that are healthy, wise, and will benefit our children. And if we do it that way, then the pennies and dollars and billions and trillions of dollars we spend, because literally that's how big it gets, will be used to get providers, doctors, hospitals to offer care in a very different kind of fashion. It'll be used to get patients to address challenges that they should be overcoming. Chronic illness is primarily driven by lifestyle behaviors.
Yes.
And it'll allow the entire country to move forward in a very different way. Now, I'm going to reduce that grandiose statement to the reality of what happens in the One Big Beautiful Act. Or it's actually a law now. Right? Not even a bill anymore. It's become an act, which makes it a law. So here's the fundamental charge I was given by the president. And he's a very thoughtful person about how this all works out. He said, don't touch the bones, the fundamentals that provide the social safety net of our country. Don't touch Social Security. Don't touch Medicare. Remember, Medicare is the program created 60 years ago this week that with Medicaid provides a social network, a framing of the obligations that we as a society have to our elderly in the case of Medicare and to our vulnerable in the case of Medicaid. And the original goal is stated beautifully. You walk into the building that Secretary Kennedy, who sends his regards, by the way, and I live in, which is the Hubert Humphrey building. Hubert Humphrey gave his quote. And it's very clear in his passion for it, and we all share this passion, which is that a government has a moral obligation, and he uses the light metaphor beautifully here, a moral obligation to help those at the dawn of their life, children, those at the twilight of their life, the seniors, and those who are living in the shadows, Russell. Living in the shadows, and you've gone through the AA program. It's beautifully, I think, articulates what it really means to be struggling, but all those people are the ones we should be covering and helping. If you're helping people beyond those groups, you're changing the rules of engagement. And they have downstream impact. And again, the most important thing I keep seeing in my job day in, I make a decision. I think it's going to help doctors. It hurts hospitals. Or I think it's going to help deal with access to care. It actually hinders it because there are downstream impacts of all these things. So in the beautiful bill, we said, first off, this bill is going to address a fundamental abuse that's entered into the healthcare system, which is to take people who are able-bodied and allow them to remain on the dole, on welfare, even though they could change that reality. Now, in Great Britain, you have some experience in that beautiful country.
Yes.
Because this wasn't addressed in the right way, there are now generations where no one knows anybody else in their family who's ever worked. If you make it easy to not work, that happens. Your grandfather didn't have a job. Your father didn't have a job. You don't have a job. Your kid doesn't have a job. You don't model what work reflects. And America was built on being a productive nation. And all great people take care of their most vulnerable, and we're a great nation, we'll do that. But we don't do it in a way that enables behaviors that aren't healthy in a society or in a family. So the one big beautiful bill, the law, now states that if you have the ability to work or to engage in the community at any level, you must do that. You must either try to get a job or get a job and work 20 hours a week, half time, but it counts. You must try to volunteer in your community in one of many ways. You must try to get an education, improve your lot in life, take care of children in your family, do something that shows that you have agency over your future. If you do that, we will give you free healthcare insurance. But if you're not willing to do that, we're going to make it uncomfortable enough that you might think about doing that. And we know this works because over the last 18 months, 15 million people have come off Medicaid because many of them were on inappropriately. They were not checking anymore after COVID. As it started to get checked, people came off. Only 10% had a problem with that and became uninsured. 90% of people took the deal. They said, you know what? You offer me free healthcare insurance. If I just try to help myself, do something I should probably be doing anyway, do something that someone should have told me to do anyway, and I'll take that deal.
Lisa, with this act now passed, with your husband, beloved Dr. Oz, now in a position of significant authority, with men like Secretary Kennedy is similarly empowered, and Jay Bhattacharya and Marty Makary, great people, Kelly Means and Casey Means, all people that I've had the good privilege of meeting, now in positions of power, now the recipients of significant budgets backed by a powerful mandate. What is the necessity for the Maha Alliance, ultimately a campaigning and support group and an awareness group, now that the people that are at the forefront of that movement are in administration?
Well, Maha is not just governmental. And if you think about making America healthy, there is the part that is the government, because even if you want to make good choices, if there are structures in place that are preventing that from happening, it's almost impossible to do so. But people have to have agency. People have to be choosing healthy lifestyles, healthy foods. So Maha Alliance is working with the governors of certain states to put in place education programs where we can teach not just food, but healthy cooking, just get integrating health into the general public. Now, if Maha and the government doesn't do their jobs, you can make healthy choices, but never know that what you're buying has artificial dyes in it, artificial sweeteners, overprocessed. So we need the education portion on the ground, but we also need the governmental shift to happen.
Yes. And in a way, isn't there even in office a requirement to continue to communicate messages to people about their own agency, as you have suggested, the choices that they can individually make and for their families? But do you consider it, both of you, to be true that even when you have access to the levers of power, there seems to be, when talking about those shadows, the indication is that the people that are in the shadows are those that have been neglected or lost or abandoned by society. And yet elsewhere in the shadows, it's quite possible that another contributor, we've talked about how at the shall we call it the lower rungs of society, there are people that are unable to participate in health on account of the kind of problems that you've described, loss of agency through institutionalized welfare. But at the upper echelons of society, perhaps there are interests that are able to maneuver and manage big food, big agriculture, which I know is not part of your remit, but also big pharma, which is, in a sense, part of the mandate, a significant part of the mandate, certainly when considering a figure like yourself, Doctor, or Secretary Kennedy, and like some of these sort of near radicals that are now in sort of at the NIH or at the FDA, is people don't trust big pharma. People don't trust big food. People don't think that the Diabetes Foundation should receive funding from processed food companies. People don't think that cancer and heart disease foundations should receive funding from processed food. And doesn't this lead us very quickly to both the problems of the deep state, that surely they lurk in the shadows, and giant corporate interests that are able to access levers of power inaccessible, not only to the electorate, but to people in office?
Russell, such a powerful way of expressing it. So let's do both extremes. You mentioned both. So this weekend, I was visiting a hospital system in South Jersey, and I went to see a federally qualified health clinic. These are clinics that actually work quite elegantly to provide comprehensive care, usually to folks in the lower rungs of the social system, as you use the phraseology, but, folks who are vulnerable. And I said, well, how many patients do you have today? She says, depends what you mean. I said, what's vague about how many patients do you see today? She says, well, we booked 80 patients. We hope half will come. Really? I said, well, is it expensive? She says, no, it's basically free. That half of the people who said they're going to come today to see a doctor to give life-saving advice, life-changing insights, only half show up. And she said, yes. So I went back to the team. I said, how often does that happen? Here's the data. You ready for this? The chance of a Medicaid patient showing up at a doctor's office. Again, Medicaid is the program for the vulnerable members of the population. The chance of them showing up for their doctor's office is 1/5 the chance of a Medicare patient. So older folks who are getting social support, having paid into a system their whole life, for whatever reason, when they want to make a doctor's appointment, they tend to show up. Whereas the folks who have not been able to do those things don't show up. So there is a bit of a challenge just to get people to believe that they matter and they should control their destiny. I bring this up because if you don't fight for that every single day, then moneyed interests do take charge. And they do begin to make it hard to be healthy in America. And that's what we're witnessing. And you've regaled the audience many times, so I won't repeat it, and how much processed food has replaced the cigarette industry, with similar tactics, as a measure that has allowed people to feed food addictions or other habits that they have in their life. And that just this past week, another data set came out arguing that it's not physical activity by itself, but it's processed food that's at a root cause of much of the obesity that we're experiencing, because it makes it easier to eat more food of the kinds that don't matter to your body. Foods with low nutritional value don't trigger in the brain the same response as foods with high nutritional value. And I'll give you a good example. Nuts. And you should always soak your nuts, by the way, Russell. I don't know if you know that.
I'm soaking them right now. I bought a small trough with me from Florida.
Perfect. I'm so
also,
proud
I
of you.
generate my own fluids.
Exactly. So proud of you. But I digress. We both do. So the reality with nuts is they're baby trees, right? So baby trees, like eggs, have tremendous nutritional value. When you eat nuts, your brain says, I got all the nutrients I was looking for. I'm not going to ask you to keep eating. That's why in every clinical trial, although they are very dense in calories, this high caloric food, nuts, has always been associated with loss of weight, not gain of weight. So people don't eat nuts because they think, I don't want to put weight on, they're fattening, because they have fat in them, they got lots of calories. But the actual impact on your body is the opposite, because your body's looking for nutrients, not calories. Now, compare that to soda pop. If you go to a lunch and have 160 calorie soda pop, which is the average amount in a can of soft drink, the impact on your body is devastating, because your body keeps eating lunch as though you didn't have the soda pop. It doesn't process liquid carbohydrates that are empty with no nutritional value as food. And so you actually overeat. The entire obesity epidemic is about 100 calories a day, just done every single day. So once you start to eat real food that comes out of the ground looking the way it looks when you're harvesting it, all of a sudden your body says, I recognize that. I understand the nutrient density of that. I'm going to stop eating more. So that's the kind of move that we should be making as a nation. And Secretary Kennedy is laser focused on this. Of course, when you do that, people eat less food. So all of a sudden, sales go down. You stop actually creating some of the illnesses that have other financial benefits to the system. Yes. So the financial lever arms don't push back on this. They may not push it forward, but they don't stop it. And again, I want to use money as a tool, like any ecosystem would have, for the right behavior to take place, for the right changes to occur. If we use money correctly, it's an ally. If we allow it to be used against us, it's the worst weapon to fight against. Because as Mark Twain said, it's very hard to convince a man of something when his financial well-being depends on it.
Interject here, if that's okay. Because when you talked about financial well-being and the shadows, you mentioned the two types of shadows, people who are living in the shadows, but also the industry that is another shadow element of our society, right? Big industry, big pharma, big agriculture, big business. We were having a conversation yesterday because I'm the type of person who...
Which are the conversations you're going to share? It was your birthday, by the way, yesterday. We had other kinds of conversations.
Thank you.
Sorry that I missed it.
And happy to Laura.
Although we did give you that thing.
You did. You brought me a present. You brought me a present.
Happy, again.
Russell and I got it together, in all fairness.
We've been planning this a while, this whole thing, Lisa.
But we were having a conversation because I get very impassioned about this sort of thing and get angry. And I'm a bit of a conspiracy theorist myself and say, this is so terrible. These people are doing this, taking advantage. They're all about money. All think they're evil. And Mama said, no, they're not evil. And I said, they are. And I said, well, maybe if they're not evil, they're just prioritizing the wrong thing. And all of a sudden it clicked. And we had this conversation where it's not that people are deliberately, or industry, or are deliberately hurting people. They're just prioritizing something other than our health for a long time. What is the beauty of Maha and people like President Trump and Bobby and Mehmet and Jay and Marty, all the people that you mentioned, they prioritize health and wellness. And that has not been the focus of our country. And what Maha is allowing us to do is take the prioritization of money and shift it with governmental force to prioritizing health. I think that's what makes Maha so beautiful to me.
I mean, we took a tremendous risk using the word shadow so repeatedly, given that you are a Jungian scholar, and the word shadow is going to provoke, I'm sure, a pretty profound image system. But I like the idea that you elect not to perjure the motives of these industries and instead appoint a kind of systemic inertia to them, following a sort of a systemic mandate achieved over time that tends towards poor outcomes. Although I must be honest, as a conspiracy theorist myself, that I do sometimes think evil has somehow entered these systems, that how else could it be that there is an almost at magnitude requirement for populations to remain sick, populations to remain ignorant. And
what if your coffee didn't just wake you up, but actually awakened you to new realms of consciousness? That's what's being promised by 1775 Peaberry. Why are you drinking stinking, jaded, lukewarm, dirty, filthy grey coffee beans when you could be having vibrant, revolutionary coffee like this one? It's an elixir of pure innocence. It's a glorious and awakening drink. Peaberries are the outliers, the lone wolves, the beans that grow solo on the branch. No twins, no compromise, no hangers-on, no hemorrhoids. Just one dense, round, flavour-packed powerhouse that tastes like it's been preparing for this cup its entire life. Let me take a sip of it now. Oh, holy beverage, we salute you. Less than 5% of all beans can become pea berries. They're the Navy SEALs of coffee beans. Some of them just can't take Hell Week. Which basically means your morning brew is rarer than a mainstream journalist telling the truth. Jake Tapper, you must have seen that Joe Biden was old. He was obviously old.
I think you have absolutely no standing to diagnose somebody's cognitive decline.
It's grown high in the Bolivian mountains where the air is thin, the vibes are thick, and the beans basically whisper ancient truths to the winds. No acidic afterburn, no synthetic weirdness, and none of the lingering shame that tastes like the hotel minibar after a 3-day bender with all the snow. Hey, I played that guy in a couple of movies. I've lived that film. I was that film. But this coffee doesn't leave you hungover in a feather boa or speaking fluent nonsense. Just bold, smooth, consciousness-activating coffee with clean energy and antioxidants so potent I drank it and remembered 3 of my past lives. Go to 1775coffee.com, use the code BRAND and get 15% off. Peaberry Wonder, Hallucinations, Glory, Psychedelic Wonder, all available here. Use the link, get the discount, get the free shipping, benefit from an awakening being. You lunatic, you.
I suppose my question to both of you and the different types of complementary power that you wield is, how do we ensure that the Maha movement is supporting the mandate of Secretary Kennedy and the other members of this team when it comes to representing the interests of the people, the population that do require education, that do require incentivization, that do require a new movement, but that we don't become